Hello everyone, I'm Jasmine, and along with me I have Vinita, Himanshu, and Anoj. We are pursuing alternative dispute resolution at Humber College. First of all, I want to thank the Gatehouse organization for giving us this opportunity to present this workshop to you guys. We are here to talk about conflict and its resolution. As we know, conflict is a part of everyone's life, and but what matters the most is how we handle the conflict. So I now ask my colleague Vinita to take over the slides and talk a little bit more about it.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Okay, so let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining today for this conflict resolution workshop. The topic for today's workshop is harmony amidst turbulence. Like my colleague Jasmine mentioned, conflict is a very common part of life. So, it is important that we learn how to navigate conflict with grace and understanding. So, that is what is going to be our focus for today's workshop. Next slide, please. So let us quickly go over the agenda for today. We are going to start off with an introduction, a basic understanding of what conflict is and some various different types of conflict. We will then eventually move on to specific approaches to conflict, and then we will also discuss a few conflict resolution skills and some other resources for conflict resolution. Next slide, please. So let us first start off with the objective of the workshop. So like I mentioned, the objective of the workshop is to equip everyone today with the basic skills of conflict resolution. So the four of us, Jasmine, Anuj, Himanshu, and I, we are a part of the Alternative Dispute Resolution Program at Humber College. Every year, Humber has students reach out to organizations that may potentially benefit from learning the skill of conflict resolution. And that is exactly what we are here to do today. And we hope that everyone can take something back at the end of this workshop. Next slide, please. So, like I mentioned, we are from this program called Alternative Dispute Resolution. Now, a lot of people don't know what ADR means. So, let us quickly go over what that is. ADR is essentially a method of resolving conflict. So, like the name suggests, it's an alternative method. It's an alternative way or a process through which disputes can be resolved. So, it is not like the traditional court litigation system, but one similarity is that it does involve neutrality. So, for instance, a dispute between two parties is essentially controlled by a third neutral party. So that is one similarity between ADR and the court process. However, this is what makes ADR really different. So what makes it different is that the participation in the ADR process is voluntary. So it is not forced. And another thing that I particularly like about ADR is that the parties or the disputants in this case have a lot more control over the outcome of the conflict. Next slide, please. So let us now understand what conflict really is. So our basic understanding of conflict is that it's a disagreement, it's an argument between two or more parties, right? And these arguments usually arise from incompatible interests, beliefs, values, and objectives. So if I were to put it plainly, it's essentially just a difference of opinion between two or more parties. And a common misconception about conflict is that it is always negative. Now, that is really not true. Conflict does not always have to be negative. It can also be positive. And when conflict is really controlled well and resolved in a positive manner, it can lead to a lot of positive outcomes as well, such as it can improve our relationship. It can also improve our communication skills. It can equip us better to deal with conflict. Next slide, please. Now, I'll just very briefly go over the types of conflicts. Now, these are four very, very general areas, and conflict definitely does exist outside of these four areas. So the very first conflict style is the type of conflict is intrapersonal conflict. Now, this is something that individuals usually experience from within. This is essentially when we have two different competing thoughts and we feel an internal conflict. That is essentially intrapersonal conflict, and it usually only involves one individual. The second type of conflict is interpersonal conflict. Now, I believe this type is more related to the traditional definition of conflict, where two or more parties are involved and they have different and uh, more commonly it is they have opposing point of views. So these opposing point of views or the difference in opinion is what leads to this conflict. So if I were to disagree with my friend over something, that would be a good example of interpersonal conflict. The third example is intergroup conflict, which essentially means that the conflict is between groups or within groups, and because there exists a lot of diversity, right? So that is essentially what leads to conflict, and that is called as intergroup conflict. The very first type is inter-organizational conflict, which usually happens between two organizations. A good example for this would be when two departments from the same company have different viewpoints, they have different focuses, they have different interests, and this is essentially what leads to conflict. I would now like to hand over to Himanshu, who would delve deeper into the various types and sources of conflict.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So, if you see on the next slide, um, we'll go through some examples of conflict. So, um, let's dive into some common examples of conflict that arise in different settings. We'll start with conflicts among entrepreneurs and then move on to conflict among students. So, among entrepreneurs, a contractual dispute is a frequent conflict. This occurs when parties disagree on terms of contracts such as payment, deliverables, and responsibilities. One other conflict between entrepreneurs is resource allocating challenges, which can also lead to a conflict. This includes a dispute over funding, manpower, and other resources essential for business operation. Marketing competition, lastly, often sparks a conflict among entrepreneurs. This can involve disputes over market share, intellectual property rights, and competitive strategies. And then moving on to conflict among students, group project disagreements is one of the biggest conflicts. Group project disagreements are quite common where students may clash over roles, contributions, and then direction of the project. One of the major conflicts between students is bully and harassment. Unfortunately, bully and harassment can also be sources of conflict among students. This conflict can have serious emotional and psychological impacts and could require immediate attention. Academic dishonesty with the rise of AI is one of the conflicts that rise in students. That it could be cheating or plagiarism that could lead to conflict between students and their faculty. This conflict can even involve ethical consideration and can result in disciplinary actions. In both entrepreneurial and student settings, conflicts are inevitable and to different interests where inevitable and due to differing interest and values and perspectives. Recognizing these common sources of conflict is the first step towards effective conflict resolution. So next slide, please. um, so, in the circle of conflict, we can see some sources of conflict. Conflict can arise from various sources, and understanding the sources is crucial for effective conflict resolution. Let us explore five main conflict strategies, conflict sources, and then we'll move forward to strategies. So one of the conflict from the sources of conflict circle is data conflict. Data conflict can arise from lack of information. One of the common sources where parties don't have access to necessary data or facts, it can also lead to misunderstandings and disputes. Misinformation is one of the uh, data conflicts where incorrect or misleading information can create confusion and escalate conflicts unnecessarily. Differing views on data relevance and can also spark conflicts. Parties may disagree on which data is important and how it should be interpreted. Differing interpretations, lastly, differing also is differing interpretations is same of the same data can lead to conflict. Differing perspectives can result in conflict conclusions and opinion. Another conflict is relationship conflict, where strong emotions, relationship conflicts can often involve strong emotions that cloud judgment. Personal feelings and biases can interfere in rational decision making. Stereotyping is another relationship conflict. Making assumptions based on stereotypes can lead to misunderstandings and prejudice. Um, Another one would be repetitive negative behavior, such as passive aggressive actions or constant criticism, can damage relationships and escalate conflicts over time. Structural conflict can arise from unequal authority within the organization or a group. Power imbalances can lead to feelings of resentment and unfair treatment. Similarly, unequal control of resources can create conflict. Disputes over access to or allocating of resources like funding, equipment, is, or or time can be constantaneous. Um, Time constraints can also be a source of structural conflict. Pressure to meet deadlines or achieve goals within the limited time frame can lead to a lot of stress and conflict. And then we'll move on to interest conflict, where interest conflict involves perceived or actual conflicts over interest. Parties may have competing goals and objectives that are incompatible. Procedural interest refers to conflict over how things should be done. Differences in processes and methods can lead to disagreements. And psychological interest involve emotional and psychological needs. Conflicts may arise when these needs are not met or understood by others. And then value conflicts, different ways of life, ideology, worldview, etc., comes under this. Value conflicts stem from differences of core values, beliefs, or worldviews. These deep-seated differences can be a challenge and challenging to reconcile. Different criteria for evaluating ideas. Lastly, conflict can arise from different criteria for evaluating ideas and solution. What one party considers valuable or effective may not align with other parties' criteria. So, summarizing this, conflict can stem in various sources, including data, issues, relationship dynamics, structural factors, conflicting interests, and different values. Recognizing these sources are the first step towards effective conflict resolution. And we'll learn some about conflict resolution strategies in our next slide. So, like we saw, understanding the sources of conflict is essential, but equally important in is knowing how to address them effectively. Let's delve into each sources and explore practical strategies for resolution. So, for data conflict, uh, a way of resolution strategy would be agreeing on the process to collect data. One way, agreeing on standardized process to collect data can resolve conflict. This ensures that everyone is on the same page from the outset. Developing a common criteria to assess data helps ensure objective and fairness evaluating of information. And using third-party experts. Using third-party experts can obviously provide unbiased opinions and help break deadlocks when parties cannot agree in one situation. And for structural conflict, it is crucial to clearly define roles and responsibilities. So, clearly defining roles and change roles is one way. So, changing roles when necessary can also help distribute power equitably. Replace disruptive behavior patterns with constructive ones, and improve team dynamics to can reduce conflict. Establishing a satisfactory decision-making process that everyone agrees upon can streamline operations and reduce conflict. Modify means of influence, like shifting from coercion to persuasion to create a more collaborative and less confrontational environment for people. And for relationship conflicts, where obviously emotion is a big part of this. Emotions can escalate in conflicts, so learning how to control emotions and focus on the procedure can help maintain objectivity. Clarifying perceptions through open dialogue can reduce misunderstandings and improve mutual understanding. Enhancing the quality and quantity of communication can foster transparency and trust, which is the key to any emotional or relationship conflict. And also, encouraging a positive problem solving attitude helps shift focus from blame to solution. Um, Moving on to value conflicts, all parties should. One way of resolving this would be allowing parties to agree to disagree. When it comes to value conflicts, sometimes it's best to agree to disagree. Respecting different viewpoints can prevent unnecessary friction. Avoiding defining problems solely in terms of values can help discussions to be constructive. Let's finding common goal that all parties can rally around can bridge value differences and foster collaborating environment. And moving on to interest conflict can be resolved by focusing on underlying interests rather than entrenched positions. Using objective criteria for evaluating can help parties see beyond personal biases. Finally, developing solutions that addresses the need of all parties involved can lead to a win-win outcome. So, in conclusion, while conflicts are inevitable, understanding the sources and employing an effective resolution strategy can lead to a positive outcome for all the parties involved. So, on next slide, we'll see we'll see Thomas Kilmann's conflict model, where Thomas Kilmann's conflict model offers a framework to understand and manage conflict through five primary conflict handling styles. Let's explore each of the style in detail. So one of the styles would be competing. Competing is uh, characterized by high assertiveness and low cooperation. The attitude here is only one can win, and it it had better be me. So competing is best suited for situations that require decisive action or when unpopular decision needs to be made. It's effective. It is effective in crisis management and quick action when and where quick action is required. Another one would be collaborating. So collaborating conflict model would be collaborating involves high assertiveness and high cooperation. This approach is also known as I reckon we can both get what we need. So it's where both parties are willing to collaborate into a solution and both party can have a win-win situation. Collaborating is an ideal for complex issues where, like I said, win-win solution is possible. It fosters teamwork and mutual respect, making it a preferred style for uh, uh, keeping long-term relationships and solving the problem. One of the methods would also be avoiding. avoiding is characterized by low assertiveness and low cooperation. This approach, you can say, is can we talk about this some other time? So if someone is approached with a conflict, one way of solving this conflict would be avoiding, saying that, can we talk about this at some other time? So avoiding can be appropriate when the issue is trivial, emotions are running high, or when more time is needed to gather information. This can also serve as a temporary measure to de-escalate tensions. Then there's compromising. Compromising involves medium of assertiveness and medium cooperation. This approach is, can we just meet in the middle on this? So compromising is ideal when both parties are equally important but incompatible in goals. It can lead to temporary or partial solutions and is often used in negotiations. Another way would be accommodating. Accommodating is characterized by low assertiveness and high cooperation. The attitude here is, okay, okay, let's do it your way. Accommodating is useful when maintaining relationships is more important than the outcome of the conflict. This can help build goodwill and trust, but should be used judiciously to avoid being taken advantage of. To, so, going through all of this Thomas Skillman models of conflict, there also comes a question where choosing the right style. So choosing the right style to handle conflict depends upon the situation, the relationship with others, and the desired outcome. Competing would be used for more decisive action and unpopular decisions. Collaborating would be used for win-win situations and complex issues. Avoiding would be used for trivial issues and where more time is needed. Compromising should be used in temporary and partial solutions, and accommodating style should be used for maintaining relationships and building goodwill. In conclusion, Thomas Kilman model provides valuable insights on managing conflicts effectively and offering a range of styles to choose from based on the situation. Now I would like to pass on to Anuj to continue with his part.
So, hello, hello everyone. Good morning. My name is Anuj, and as Jasmine, my classmate, already introduced in the beginning, we are all students of alternate dispute resolution program at Humber College. So, moving forward in the presentation, now we'll be talking about what approaches to the conflict resolution can be taken, right? Like how can somebody approach a certain sort of conflict and what outcome can come out of that. So firstly, there is a power-based approach, and then there is rights-based approach, and lastly, there is interest-based approach. So in power-based approach, basically, as the name suggests, the person who uses the power-based approach is trying to, signify some kind of dominance and control with the disputed person. So and he tries, and for example, this can be coercion or manipulation. So he tries to manipulate the other party to get his own personal way in which he can resolve the dispute. But in doing so and using the power based approach, there is a lot of high risk and a lot of chance that the relationship might be damaged with the other person, because the other person uses a lot of manipulation techniques and tries to assert dominance over the other person. So next can be the rights-based approach, which basically, uh, s- is a way of following everything which is according to the rules and regulations. So the example of this can be arbitration or litigation. Litigation is basically going to the court procedures and following all the court necessary steps and guidelines. So that's why this is a rights-based approach, because everything is structuralized, and everything can be, done according to the rules and regulations. So moving ahead, the last one is interest-based approach. This kind of approach is, mostly suggested to all the people, as in this kind of approach, all the parties or all the disputed parties can get their interest and needs satisfied. So that's why in this interest-based approach, basically the example that's why of this approach is mediation and negotiation. So that's why mediation and negotiation are known as how people tend to uh, frame their relationship and try to rebuild their relationship instead of damaging the relationship. So therefore it promotes collaboration and sustainable agreements. Now, how can one person improve their ability to resolve conflict? So there are a lot of ways and techniques in which a person can be more uh, practiced and be and can be and learn about their ways or techniques to resolve a conflict. So firstly, there is acknowledgement of the conflict that the other person needs to, or yourself need to realize that, yeah, I'm actually in a conflict with the other person. So moving forward, there is active listening. Without of active listening, you'll not be able to be able to hear what the other disputed party has to say. Like there might be a ground or anything that he's mentioning might be true, and you are just not able to hear it or see it from the other person's perspective. That's why active listening is such an important technique in this in this resolution process. Now, moving forward, there is defining of the issue. So the issue which is at hand is the main crux of the problem of the or the dispute. So that's why if both the parties tend to emphasize on that, then it it becomes it becomes a lot clearer why the dispute is being arise or why the dispute has been continuing for so long. And moving forward, there is seeking common grounds, like common grounds of both the parties, on which they can settle upon the dispute. They can generate options, they can evaluate their options, they can select different kinds of solutions, they can regenerate their options. And next is communication. So communication is very key in on how a person can improve their ability to resolve a conflict. If you cannot be able to communicate or voice your problems or what is bothering you or troubling you, then the other party might not never be able to understand what you're going through. So that's why communication is so important and so emphasized in mediation, negotiation, or arbitration, even for matter of fact. So next is implementing the solutions. Once you have gathered, all the different ways, gone through different ways, uh, have achieved the common ground, then it's time to implement the solution both the parties have reached to. That's why this is so key and so uh, and such a crucial last step in arriving to a solution, because the parties need to implement that solution. And the next step after the implementing the solution is follow up. We try to, follow up is basically you try to communicate with the party after the dispute has been resolved, so that the other party or and both the parties of the dispute can learn if both the parties are satisfied in the longer run, or are they experiencing any kind of issues or trouble through this. And one of the very last is reflecting and learning from the experience. So until and unless you try to learn from the dispute that you have been in, or you try to reflect upon yourself, you'll not be able to learn from it and be able to apply the techniques. So moving ahead, now we're going to talk about what are triggers. So basically triggers are some kind of situations or memories that cause a lot of intense emotional reaction from a person. So this tends to escalate tension and hinder effective communication. This tries to cloud the judgment of the disputed party, and as they have been triggered by the specific situation or the emotion. So uh, there are quite a number of ways how a person can manage their triggers as well. So the first one is being self-aware of your triggers. That's a very important uh, technique to have, since you can automatically tell when in what part of the conflict you will be triggered or when you can be triggered as well. So another one can be space appropriation. If you take a step back from triggering situations to prevent further escalation, that is quite helpful in those sort of situations. If you try to, are self-aware about what your triggers are, then you can, self-assess that if I take a step back in this, I might be able to, avoid this kind of conflict being escalated. And lastly, there is addressing the situation. So when you return to the situation with a calm and clearer mind, it enables a more effective and thoughtful response. Once you are calmed down, once you have walked away from your trigger, you have had time to assess the situation. You've tried to go through it in your mind. So now you are like, okay, what can I expect from this mode? So that's why it helps to be more effective. Uh, uh, it's more effective and generates a more thoughtful and calm response from the disputed parties. Now, lastly, there are various conflict resolution skills that the people in general day-to-day life, need to have in order to avoid conflicts or disputes, and they can even apply these techniques in order to resolve these disputes as well. So firstly, there is active listening. So since I also earlier mentioned in the previous slide, listening attentively and to understand the perspectives is quite really important to a dispute or a conflict as in general. So active listening techniques are, having an engaging conversation, nodding your head yes, or making eye contact. So the other person, thinks that, yeah, I'm being heard, or I'm in a civil conversation with the other person. So next step is effective communication. So this clearly conveys information and manages expectations. So having effective communication is quite really emphasized by everyone for and is such an important skill for conflict resolution, since until and unless you communicate to the other party or the disputed party, they might never be able to know what's bothering you or troubling you. So next is impartiality. So these decisions based on objective criteria and not on personal biases. So you can't be impartial about the other person. Like, yeah, I want to get only my way, and I don't care about him. But that's why the situation escalates and the conflict never resolves. That's why being impartial and having a sense of like I need to hear the other party as well is quite important. Now, next is conflict management. So, managing emotions and tensions to maintain a constructive atmosphere is just as important, and more so important is having empathy. Showing understanding and support for each party's emotions is just as important, because since until and unless you empathize with the other party, it creates a soft spot in the eyes of the other party. Yeah, like this person is really understanding uh, my conflict or my uh, or the main crux of the issue at hand. So the last one is building a rapport. So until and unless you build trust and rapport with all the parties involved, you'll not be able to move forward or have a civil conversation with them, to which would ultimately lead to a resolution of the conflict. So why do we need these skills in general, or to apply these skills in a conflict, is because to have enhanced relationships. The alternate dispute resolution is all about having uh, uh, is all about building relationships and not destroying them. You try to the connect the two disputed parties, not to reach to a solution but to preserve their relationship as well. So that's why there is increased productivity as well. When these relationships are maintained, the sense of productivity in both the minds of the disputed parties tends to increase. And this also helps in improved decision makings, and also after having these skills or applying these skills, the stress and the tension of both the parties is significantly reduced because there is a sense of satisfaction in their minds as well. So now I'll try to now I'll give the mic to my colleague Himanshu so that he can explain the main the main reason why we are all gathered here to talk about the Conflict Resolution Center at the Humber College. Himanshu, if you please can explain about it.
Yeah. So, Conflict Resolution Center, Humber College, CRC, was launched in partnership with St. Stephen's Community Housing, that is also known as Neighborhood. So, both these organizations help uh, provide services to guide you through some of your concern that you may be facing in your personal lives. Whether you're experiencing issues or on or off campus, we are here to offer you support and coach you on how to address conflicts in your life. And you can reach out to Conflict Resolution Center at Humber uh, via the link provided, and we are here to help you out in any conflict that might arise in your life. With this, I would like to g- give it back to Anuj to conclude our presentation.
So thank you, Himanshu, for explaining the Conflict Resolution Center at Humber College. So yeah, that was it, guys. That was all about conflict, all about alternate disputes and how they can be resolved without going to the court procedures, or in general how people can resolve their conflicts, applying various techniques, having various skills through active listening, through having an open mind, being impartial about it. So these are quite helpful ways in which a person or all the disputed parties at hand can resolve their you know disputes without damaging the relationship, because preserving the relationship is what it's all about, the ADR program.